Okay, let's just dive right into this explainer, because today we are tackling an absolute giant of a question. How in the world do we bridge the massive gap between the cold, static mathematics of physical laws and the deeply dynamic, personal, frankly messy experience of the divine? We're going to explore a truly mind-bending framework that takes some of the most profound questions in physics and theology and kind of mashes them together to create a totally new way of understanding our relationship with the universe.
Right off the bat, we've got to look at this massive paradox at the very heart of modern physics and theology. It's all about the nature of time itself. For centuries, theologians and philosophers have basically banged their heads against the wall over this time paradox. Think about it. If you have a creator who is completely atemporal, meaning they exist totally outside of time, no past, present, or future, how on earth can that being interact with a temporal, constantly changing world like ours? Does a timeless God act in linear time? It feels like a total contradiction, right? Well, as it turns out, modern physics has its very own version of this exact same problem.
And that brings us right into what we can call the Einstein view. This is the idea of a perfectly symmetrical universe, where change is essentially just an illusion. Thanks to the brilliant mathematician Emmy Noether, physics tells us that if physical laws don't change over time, which is a concept known as time translation symmetry, then energy is fundamentally conserved. Sounds great, right? But it leads us straight into this idea of the block universe, or the B theory of time. Basically, imagine time as just a static, four-dimensional block. Every single moment of the past, present, and future just exists, frozen in this block, all at once, tenselessly. In a perfectly symmetrical universe like this, the actual lived change that you and I experience every day, it isn't mathematically real.
Now, while Einstein's incredibly famous E equals mc squared gives us this perfectly static equivalence, there's a new proposed framework out there, E equals a factorial, and it offers a radical, game-changing alternative. Look at E equals mc squared. It tells us what energy is. It's an equivalence claim using the speed of light squared as a constant multiplier. It fits like a glove into that frozen, static block universe we just talked about. But E equals a factorial, that formula is essentially an engine of liberation from that static block, because instead of a constant multiplier, it uses a factorial, that little exclamation point, which totally shifts the focus to how time actually evolves and creates new information.
So let's break that down. Think of A as the foundational axioms of the cosmos, basically the original breaks in uniform symmetry. Then you have the exclamation point, the factorial. This is the spark. It's a literal combinatorial explosion. It perfectly models how just a tiny linear increase in foundational structure completely shatters that static symmetry and generates this explosive, nonlinear web of causal possibilities. And finally, E is the resulting evolution of the universe. It's the causal, information-theoretic mechanism that allows a phenomenon to actually, really happen.
And here is absolutely the most crucial rule of information theory you need to keep in mind for all this. Sans change, there is no information. If a system is perfectly symmetrical and static, like that block universe, absolutely nothing can be known. Nothing can be experienced. Think about it for a second. Asymmetry is what actually creates a phenomenon. If the universe just sat there in perfect frozen symmetry, there would be zero data, zero events, and zero lived reality. Fundamentally, change is a hard requirement for information to even exist.
So, how does this all translate to reality? Well, this theory builds a structural necessity for change, turning time into a vast, sprawling web of causal data that you and I navigate every single day. We call this dimension of measurable linear time Chronos. You can think of Chronos as the factorial engine just constantly running in the background. It is the incredibly massive sequence of every single possible ordering of history, just endlessly churning out the raw sequential data of our universe. To really ground this massive abstract concept, let's trace a physical journey that perfectly represents moving through this chronological web of data. Imagine you're moving linearly through space and time. You start up in Nashville, driving down roads that parallel the tragic Trail of Tears corridor. You move down through Decatur, Alabama, which was a historical transfer point during the Cherokee removal. Then, purely by chance on this drive, you end up finding lodging in Tuscumbia, literally right next to the childhood home of Helen Keller, where her incredible educational awakening took place. Finally, you keep going down to Moundville, an ancient indigenous site. That entire trip? That is a journey straight through Chronos, a literal sequence of distinct, raw physical and historical data points.
But here's the thing, just measuring the journey isn't enough. The real magic, the actual breakthrough, happens in the transition from Chronos to Kairos, and Kairos is the singular lived present of the observer. If Chronos is that sprawling, infinite web of factorial data, Kairos is the asymmetry of data compression. What does that mean in plain English? It's that exact lightning strike moment a human mind takes an overwhelming, massive amount of historical complexity and squeezes it down into one single, powerful, meaningful moment of recognition.
It's like this. When a traveler simultaneously recognizes the profound tragedy of the Cherokee removal and the miraculous breakthrough of Helen Keller happening in the exact same geographical space, an informational awakening occurs. In this lived present, you aren't just looking at random historical trivia anymore. You are witnessing deep historical structures overlapping. The dark, heavy history of the Trail of Tears suddenly and violently intersects with Helen Keller communicating her very first word at the water pump. The result? The data compresses. True meaning is generated.
This incredible contrast perfectly demonstrates how Kairos acts as a lens. It compresses these vast layers of diffuse historical structures into one immediate felt reality in the mind of the witness. Take Tuscumbia, for instance. There, we have a highly compressed, intensely remembered singular moment of individual awakening. Now compare that to Moundville, the absolute inverse pole of this journey. Moundville represents centuries of vast collective human activity where the individual days are largely unrecoverable, just lost to time. Yet Kairos is what allows the human mind to stand squarely between these two extreme poles and witness that profound structural harmony all at once.
Now, speaking of profound harmony, Albert Einstein famously spoke of something he called a cosmic religious feeling. For him, this was essentially an escape from the merely personal prison of individual human desires, a way to behold a unified universe. Einstein, the very guy who gave us the foundation for the static block universe, believed true religiosity was found purely in the awe of the universe's rational, mathematical order. He really felt that viewing the universe as a single significant whole was the absolute highest form of spiritual experience, and basically a way to escape the petty, messy concerns of daily human life. Because of this, Einstein strongly, emphatically rejected a God that acts like a magnified human intervening in our fates. He preferred a deity that was totally synonymous with the rational, mathematical order of nature. He was hugely influenced by the philosopher Spinoza, who basically argued that God and the deterministic laws of nature were the exact same thing. For Einstein, the idea of a personal God who grants wishes or bends the rules of physics just made absolutely zero sense. For him, the miracle wasn't intervention. The miracle was that the universe was comprehensible at all.
Okay, so let's bring all these threads together into an ultimate synthesis. On one side, as our thesis, we have Einstein's static block universe, symmetrical, governed by an impersonal God of pure mathematical order. On the flip side, the antithesis, our actual lived reality, which absolutely requires change and information to exist at all. The synthesis of these two completely opposing ideas? It's found in Kairos. By witnessing the data compress, we bridge the gap. We connect those cold, timeless laws of physics with the warm, temporal reality of human meaning.
What's absolutely fascinating here is reinterpreting Einstein's own awe, this reason manifest in nature that he loved so much. It doesn't actually have to erase the personal experience at all. While Einstein sought to escape the personal, the E equals A factorial framework suggests the personal experience is completely required. Einstein writes about striving to comprehend the reason that manifests itself in nature. But remember our golden rule: sans change, there is no information. Without a localized observer, a person, to witness the asymmetry and actually compress the data, that reason remains totally unmanifested. It would be completely unknowable in the static block.
And this brings us right to the third pole, a truly mind-bending concept that ties it all together. A timeless God doesn't have to break the laws of physics to step into a linear timeline. The personal relationship with God isn't some supernatural break in physics. It is the very act of witnessing the universe's compressed harmony. It literally resolves the time paradox. The interaction happens when the human mind, operating within the factorial engine of Chronos, suddenly experiences the massive data compression of Kairos. The relationship is the informational awakening itself.
What this ultimately means is that you do not have to flee into a paradise of pure mathematics to find God or find meaning. You find that connection directly through the asymmetrical, informational awakening of the present moment. Think of it like this. The universe does all the heavy lifting, unfolding through the massive combinatorial explosion of causal data. But it takes you, the observer, to experience the compression of Kairos. When you witness deep historical structures overlapping, like recognizing the heavy weight of the Trail of Tears right alongside the triumph of Helen Keller, that spark of meaning isn't just a neat psychological trick. In this framework, that informational awakening is the precise mechanics of an interactive relationship with the divine order of the cosmos.
So I want to leave you with this provocative thought to ponder today.
How are you actively compressing the vast web of history into your own meaningful relationship with the cosmos? Every single day, you're moving through the staggering complexity of Chronos. The data of the universe is constantly flowing all around you. But the real question is, are you ready to act as the witness? Are you ready to let that data compress into a Kairos moment of true informational awakening? Because the universe's harmony is just waiting to be recognized, and your lived present is literally the only key that unlocks it.